They originally, I think, the history, or at least what the history books would have you believe, was that it was originally established as Decoration Day. All right, can everybody hear me? Are we doing okay? Yay, okay. So originally that was established by LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, in order to commemorate the fallen for the war. And recently, like literally yesterday, I had something else completely different written out, and then I read this article by Sarah Lazar at Alternate regarding Memorial Day, and talking about so Memorial Day, like originally, like the true origins of it, as per the article that Sarah wrote, during the Civil War, there was a racetrack in the South. I forget the specific, I didn't write down the specific location, but it's in the South, where they left hundreds of Confederate soldiers, black Confederate soldiers, basically to die. And they just kind of like left them for dead. And black soldiers the end of slavery went back and gave them a proper burial. They held a memorial for them and honored their struggle and the fact that they died in order to help get rid of slavery in the United States. There was this great gathering, and like there was children who came and laid flowers at all, like just kind of as a mass grave, and there was this huge procession to honor hundreds of nameless soldiers, all who happened to be black, who had fought to end slavery. Subsequently, they renamed the racetrack and basically named it in honor of a Confederate general in order to try and erase the history. And then, as your kind of the conventional narrative goes, Memorial Day was supposedly established in the late 60s, early 70s by LBJ in order to honor the fallen in the war. And this was part of to essentially sanitize and sort of a precursor to the message of supporting the troops. This perfect empty calorie statement that it's like, yeah, support the troops. Well, yeah, why wouldn't you support the troops? And supposedly with the purpose of honoring the fallen. And if we really were meant to honor the fallen, we wouldn't be so eager to make more of them. And I think that's a sentiment most of us here can agree with. And under the conventional narrative, we would honor the fallen specifically for U.S. military conflicts. However, in light of like today's political environment, we have many fallen. We have Laquan McDonald, who was shot 17 times walking away from a police officer. We have countless victims of police violence here in Chicago. And just as many activists who are working to stop police violence, who are trying to bring up their neighborhoods, who are dying, their names unknown. We have immigrants. We have the immigrant community that they're trying to carve out a better life for themselves in the United States, because essentially in Central and South America, U.S. economic policies have made it so that they have no opportunities to make a better life for themselves except for to flee. And with 45's administration and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, they've weaponized the Immigration Customs Enforcement they say that they are deporting criminals. And you know, that's usually a sentiment that a lot of people can get like a blank endorsement from pretty much everybody. But they never specify what they consider the crime. And the fact that they are in the United States without documents and what should be rightfully referred to as a refugee crisis, that is the crime. as far as they're concerned, and they're being deported. There are people who are dying crossing the border. They are people who are dying in the streets here in Chicago, like trying to make a better life. And they are also veterans. They are veterans of a different war, not necessarily the war that, or wars that our current government would have you fondly remember. But they are looking for sanctuary. They're looking for a safe place in which to, have their families, to set down roots, and just lead a better life. Chicago is allegedly a sanctuary city in which supposedly that the Chicago Police Department, local law enforcement, will not communicate with federal law enforcement for purposes of deporting, but taking sanctuary from immigration, bringing it back to what sanctuary could mean for all of us. I'm kind of jumping all over the place on this, I apologize. But sanctuary is like having a safe place to grow, to live. And we can't have that waging economic war against the poor, waging an ideological war in the Middle East, which inevitably results in blowback, which makes us here in the United States unsafe. And we can't have that. So, I've kind of rambled on, said sort of like at least what I had prepared. We have a couple of speakers signed up for you. So first, I'm going to have Joe Miller take the stage. He's a member of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Vietnam Veterans Against the War is celebrating their 50th anniversary since their establishment. So without further ado, Joe Miller.
Okay, folks. Obviously, we're not professionals, so I'm going to take a moment to figure out where the microphone is here. You hear me okay? Is that better? Okay. All right. I'm Joe Miller, Navy veteran of the Vietnam War. I joined VVAW here in Chicago back in 1970, and I'm currently one of the national board members of VVAW. I'd like to begin my remarks by taking a few pieces out of a message that Howard Zinn spoke in 1976 about Memorial Day. I'd like to start with that. He said, Memorial Day will be celebrated by the display of flags, the sound of bugles and drums, by parades and speeches and unthinking applause. It will be celebrated by giant corporations, which make guns, bombs, fighter planes, aircraft carriers, and an endless assortment of military junk which await the billions in contracts to be approved by Congress and the President. We've heard that before, right? He goes on to say, let us honor Thoreau, who went to jail to protest the Mexican War, and Mark Twain, who denounced our war against the Filipino people at the turn of the century, the last century, and I.F. Stone, who virtually alone among newspaper editors exposed the fraud and the brutality of the Korean War. Let us honor Martin Luther King, who refused the enticements of the White House and the cautions of his associates and thundered against the war in Vietnam. Zinn goes on to say, we are told we must be practical, say those whose practicality has consisted of a war every generation. We mustn't deplete our defenses, say those who have depleted our youth, stolen our resources in the end. It is living people, not corpses, creative energy, not destructive rage, which are the only real defense, not just against other governments trying to kill us, but against our own also trying to kill us. That was 1976, Howard Zinn. It could have been spoken today. As Ed mentioned, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. We had our origins in a small group of Vietnam veterans in New York City who marched under a hastily produced banner, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, in April 1967. By June of that year, we had been officially established as an organization. People like Jan Berry, who was one of the founding members. By 1967, many of us who would eventually join VVAW were in very different places in our lives. Many of us were in uniform after serving for a number of years and beginning to move against this war. Some had already served and were looking for a way to stop that war before many of their brothers and sisters died. Even more had recently joined the military thinking they were defending their country, killing commies for Christ, as it was said back then. Greater numbers were still too young to serve, but would be sucked into the draft machine too soon. Hundreds or thousands of those would also find their way into VVAW over the years. We in VVAW were a part of what Dr. King called for a radical revolution of values. We were determined and young and idealistic. Many of us thought that when the country saw its veterans marching against the war they fought in, the country would be turned around. Even though VVAW did have a direct impact on the anti-war movement, we soon learned that the system needed wars like that. The system did not see us as heroes fighting for peace and social justice. The system saw us as a threat to its existence, along with all the other so-called threats, such as black liberation, women's liberation, student power, and the like. But we continued to fight, to organize, to exist. 50 years later, we are still here, no longer the young idealists, but still the angry young men and women that we were back then, doing what we can to promote social and political activism in the long-term struggle for peace and social justice wherever it needs to be fought. Wherever VVAW members exist, they are willing and mostly able to join in the fights, local and national. We remain true to our origins. Now our country and the rest of the world face new threats from a radical right-wing tweet administration. This group of misleaders want to deconstruct the state machinery on the backs of the poor, the sick, the elderly, the very young, racial and religious minorities, the LGBTQ communities, and veterans. It is a billionaires club that is all about their bottom line, a line that keeps most of us on the bottom, grasping for the crumbs. One of the more obvious signs of where this so-called administration wants to take us is seen as in the continuing attack on the Affordable Care Act, or any health care for that matter. So-called Tea Party members and so-called moderates inside the Republican Party went toe-to-toe in an effort to repeal Obamacare, or the ACA, all with the full support of the blowhard-in-chief. The fundamental campaign promise was to be the major signal achievement of the tweet administration. However, as the population learned more details about this planned repeal, they began to make noise. Republican town halls, even Democratic town halls, across the country erupted into shouting matches as the politicians tried to convince their constituencies of the positive aspects of this new plan. But facts got in the way, not alternative facts. Actual facts got in the way. Numbers got in the way. Soon 60% of those polled declared their solid opposition to this new plan. Finally, President Tweet and his minions had to back off, at least for a little while. Then there is the ongoing investigation of Russian connections to the Trump campaign in 2016. How much fun have we been having over the past week watching that play out? Was the American electorate cheated in their election of a new political leadership of this country? Were deals made with an outside power, a hostile power? What will be the ultimate outcome of this? Impeachment? A Nixon-like resignation? Who the hell knows? But keep watching. Activism against these right-wing attacks on the people's general welfare is on the rise, with the first worldwide demonstrations held the day after the inauguration of the new power clique. People everywhere are talking and acting in a resistance mode We in VVAW will be there, perhaps in fewer numbers than before, but we will be there. We call on all our members and supporters to be active wherever and however they can. Donate time, money, brain and muscle power. Act, speak out. And to borrow a line from the famous civil rights song, a change is going to come.
Let's give it up for Barry.
Shorty. Is that okay?
Step closer.
Closer? Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to talk about not people who died in Vietnam, but all of our friends who died since coming home. VVAW people. They hadn't have gone off to war. Agent Orange wouldn't have affected them. They wouldn't have become drug addicts and died of AIDS and other things. They would have lived much longer. And so the first person I want to remember is Zach Walkendunk, a member of VVAW since he was born. Was born with multiple problems, including fluttering eye. He got picked on in school, and every doctor that ever saw him said he's going to die before he becomes 12. And then it was, he's never going to finish high school. But not only did he finish high school, he got 3 advanced degrees besides that. And because there was no Obamacare, they could never get insurance for him. When he died with complications tied to Agent Orange, his parents were paying, he was 30, his parents were paying $1,600 a month just for the maintenance medication. The family literally is made up of saints, people who had suffered in that. And he used to come here and testified over in the federal building as a child to the fact that the children should be covered too when we had the federal lawsuit against the 9 big chemical companies that had produced Agent Orange. And while he had the whole room crying, including the cops, it didn't touch the judge's heart. And the judge found for the chemical companies. And so they never became part of that judgment. And he died a few years ago in family and stuff. Here in the city, not all of our members, and so of course Zach never served in the military, although he died because of complications. But James Gates, Jimmy Gates, a person who my friend helped get his disability, and I'll remember him. My name I froze on everything. But Bill was a member, Jim was a longtime member of VVAW, and it wasn't Agent Orange that got him. He was in the Army in the last segregated Army unit, which was in Arizona, and they made the unit be closer to the atomic testing, and they made him stay at the site of the explosion longer because they thought maybe black skin would repel it. Just like when they thought black skin down in Panama, the turn of the century, might stop mosquitoes and things. And so it was done and he belonged to VVAW until his death. And he wouldn't have had it if it wasn't. Raise your hand, brother. Ray Parrish. And so we have had lots of people, and that have passed because of the military. Some of you probably have never heard of Walter Clem, Wally, the guy from Milwaukee, a funny person, and he was a funny guy in VVAW as well. And he came up in 1977 with something called, because we were making a big deal about African freedom fighting. And in fact, we were the first vets group to go to African Liberation Day in Washington, D.C., and we fought Nazis. In fact, he tried to interfere with us. And Wally came up with a thing that was called Fatigues for Freedom Fighters. And we collected fatigues for the African National Congress and other guerrilla groups in Africa. And it was a very, very popular thing. Made people feel good, like they were participating in stuff. And other liberation groups as well. But he never could deal with the pain that he had caused other people. And so him, and also a guy named Clarence Fitch out of New Jersey, and Dave Klein out of New Jersey as well, all shared needles and became aides from sharing needles. And Wally died in 2000, and Clarence Fitch, and there was a Frontline documentary on PBS of Clarence called Another Brother, and he died like in 1990. And Dave Klein, of course, only died a few years ago. But if they would have never gone to Vietnam, they wouldn't have died. And so one of my final ones is Bill Davis and Dave as well. Bill was from this area, and you poor guys just didn't miss it. I put his picture up from last year on my Facebook site of them barbecuing, and for some reason Facebook won't let me do it, so I got Jeff, the editor of the paper, to Facebook me his picture, and it's a picture from a couple of years ago when he was cooking barbecue after the Veterans Day. And it was typical of Bill, smiling as he was cooking in the cold and serving the people. And we miss him as well. He was also a trade union activist. He was president of the largest IAM local in the country, besides being national leader of Vietnam veterans against the war. And so I want to thank you. I want to ask you to remember these people as well, and remember people who died, as Paul Reutersham, one of the founding members of the Agent Orange Club. And he said, I died in Vietnam and I didn't even know it. And that's with all of these people as well. Thank you.
Barry, thank you for sharing your stories, your memorials, the people who we should memorialize. Next up, I have Eric Garcia from the Veteran Artist Movement. Eric Garcia is an illustrator, political artist, and an Air Force veteran originally from New Mexico. So let's give a warm welcome to Eric Garcia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I want to start out by doing something different. Usually, on Memorial Day, we honor those men and women who have lost their lives serving in the U.S. military. But for a moment, I want to acknowledge the hundreds and thousands of men, women, and children who have lost their lives because of U.S. military's current role in the war in the Middle East. God have mercy on our souls. My name is Eric Garcia, and I served from 1997 to 2002 in the U.S. Air Force. I served 2 tours in Europe, and one of them during the Kosovo campaign, when your tax dollars were used to destroy another country. I was a member of the Air Force's security forces, and my job was to guard and protect the air base. As soon as the bombing campaign started, war demonstrators surrounded what I was sworn to defend, and I didn't flinch when I was ordered to point my M60 machine gun at the peaceful civilians protesting against the United States' continuous and gratuitous use of its military might. Ironically, I only understood my selfish and misguided actions until last year, when I was supporting the Sioux Nation fighting for water at Standing Rock. And I saw my reflection in the barrel of the National Guard, whose mission was to protect oil and an oil company. This is when I truly understood firsthand how our military was never about protecting freedom and democracy, but about conquering real estate and resources. But I want you to know, there is a group of people here today that has a certain influence, a certain power to change things. A group of people that has an experience which is respected by the rich politicians to the blue-collar cops. And that group is fellow veterans. I have seen this power firsthand at Standing Rock, where veterans came from all over this country to stand up against an injustice. And for a brief moment, ears perked up, guns went down, and the oil drilling stopped. That's power. And I want you, fellow veterans, to realize that you have this power. And we should use it to end all unjust military interventions that are happening not only overseas, but right here at home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As we're wrapping up, a couple of things, because I think one of the things I've learned recently is you got to have an ask or several asks. So, first ask on this Memorial Day. We live in probably the most absurd, trying, bizarre, challenging times in living memory in this time. So, first ask, look out for one another. Like, just for no reason other than make sure everybody is okay. Check in with a friend. Make a list of 5 or 6 people and send them a text message, Facebook message, whatever the case might be. It's like, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? Want to go out for coffee? Like, just check in with one another, because at this point in time, with all the absurdity that is coming out of this administration, it is important to take care of yourselves. That itself is a radical act, and also to look out for one another. 2, my second ask, support other struggles. There are so many activists fighting for so many different things, like all across the spectrum. And sometimes the simple matter of showing up and being present at other people's events, even if it's not your particular activity, like showing up means something. Like Eric said, there's a power that people have, that veterans have. People respect what veterans have to say. If we have a bunch of veterans showing up for Black Lives Matter protests, for BYP 100, for organized communities against deportation, if veterans start showing up for that, if veterans start showing up for Fight for 15, there's no telling what we can do. There's a coalition that's started here in Chicago called the R3 Coalition, or Resist, Reimagine, Rebuild. They're holding an event on Thursday, May 30th. Sorry, was that Wednesday? Sorry, May 30th at 6 p.m. at the Cultural Center for Fight for 15. I think if we had some of the people who are showing up here show up at the Cultural Center for that event, I think that would be a powerful gesture of solidarity. And finally, just for IVAW and VVAW, like, we can't do this without some support. We're gonna pass the, we have a can, oh, Barry has it. If you could make a donation, $1, like $2, whatever you can give, it would be fantastic. Lastly, we are going to take some time to, at this point in time, like, remember, memorialize all those who have died in a struggle, whatever struggle it might be. It doesn't have to be the U.S. military. We have flowers, which we'll be handing out. Take a moment just in quiet prayer or meditation. Just reflect on the people who have passed, reflect on those people who have meant something in your lives, and then drop the flower into the Chicago River. Thank you all so much for coming today.
There are flowers up here to be handed out. There are thoughts and prayers to be thought and prayed. She's middle-aged now. She uses her time for her friends and her work and improving her mind. She's lonesome tonight. She knows who it's for. Her sweetheart who died in the war. When her lover came home, she thought that her life would be husband and babies, mother and wife. But the man was a stranger who walked through her door. Her sweetheart had died in the war. Died of the bullets, died of the shells, died with his buddies in 2 years of hell, with a wall round his heart where love needs a door. Her sweetheart had died in the war. He's a pretty good boss. He works with his crew, taking old buildings, making them new. Some nights he drinks less, some nights he drinks more. His sweetheart, she died in the war. Died of the hard works, the booze and the pain. Died of the distance he couldn't explain. Oh, the girl was a stranger who walked out the door. His sweetheart had died in the war. She's middle-aged now. She uses her time for her friends and her work and improving her mind. She might have done less, she might have had more. Her sweetheart died in the war. Her sweetheart died in the war. We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of hope and friends we love so dear. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the wars to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting the night, tenting the night, tenting on the old campground. We're tenting tonight on the old campground, thinking of days gone by, of the loved ones at home that gave us the hand and the tear that said goodbye. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting the night, tenting the night, tenting on the old campground. We're tired of war on the old campground. Many are dead and gone. Of the brave and true who left their homes, others been wounded long. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting the night, tenting the night, tenting on the old campground. We've been fighting today on the old campground. Many are lying here. Some are dead, some are dying. Many are in tears. Many are the hearts weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting the night, tenting the night, tenting on the old campground. Dying the night, dying the night, dying on the old campground.
All right, if you join us in dropping the flowers at for the river. Afterwards, we will be going to Quenchers on Fullerton and Western. It's a social gathering.
Drinking.